The scissors glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights of the locker room as Mason Knight cornered Grace Turner against the metal lockers, her cheerleading ponytail trapped in his fist while his two football buddies blocked the exits. In 15 seconds, the new scholarship cheerleader would deliver a roundhouse kick that would not only save her hair, but expose the darkest secret of Willowbrook High's most powerful family. What started as rejected advances and wounded pride would end with 3 boys on the floor and a principal's career in ruins. Subscribe now, because this Texas showdown proves that sometimes the quietest fighters pack the deadliest kicks. Grace Turner stood at her assigned locker in Willowbrook High School at 7:15 a.m., her fingers trembling slightly as she spun the combination lock. The smell of fresh paint and industrial cleaner couldn't mask the underlying scent of privilege that permeated every corner of this elite Texas institution. At 16, Grace was everything Willowbrook wasn't supposed to accept: a working-class transfer student, here on a cheerleading scholarship that barely covered her uniforms. Her reflection in the small magnetic mirror showed tired hazel eyes and natural blonde hair pulled into the regulation high ponytail required for morning practice. The uniform, crisp white and burgundy with the Willowbrook Warriors logo, fit perfectly, but Grace knew she'd never truly fit here. Not when her father worked double shifts at the oil refinery to pay for her little brother's medical bills. Not when she'd learned her first cartwheel in a community centre gym held together by duct tape and determination. But Grace had a secret that even her scholarship application hadn't revealed. Before her family's financial crisis forced them to move from Houston, she'd spent 8 years training in mixed martial arts at her uncle's dojo. The trophies were packed away in storage now, along with her black belt, and the confidence that came with knowing she could defend herself. Here at Willowbrook, she'd chosen to bury that part of herself, to be just another cheerleader trying to earn her spot through jumps and tumbles rather than kicks and strikes. Mason Knight ruled Willowbrook High like a medieval lord surveying his domain. At 6'3" with quarterback shoulders and his father's sharp jawline, he commanded attention whether he wanted it or not. But Mason always wanted it. As the principal's son and captain of the state champion football team, he'd grown up believing the school was his birthright, the students his subjects, and any girl he wanted should be grateful for his attention. His kingdom operated on simple rules. Money talked, talent walked, and outsiders learned their place or got pushed out. Mason enforced these rules with 2 loyal lieutenants, Brady Chen, whose banker father funded the new stadium, and Tyler Morrison, whose mother sat on the school board. Together, they formed an unholy trinity that had driven out 3 scholarship students in the past 2 years through campaigns of harassment so subtle that no complaint ever stuck. Mason had noticed Grace Turner the moment she'd walked onto the practice field 2 weeks ago, not just because she was beautiful, though she was, in that natural way that made the other cheerleaders' expensive highlights look like they were trying too hard, but because of how she moved. There was a controlled grace to her movements, a confidence that went beyond athletics. She executed flips with precision, landed with barely a sound, and carried herself like someone who knew exactly what her body could do. He'd approached her after that first practice, flashing the smile that usually had girls melting. "Hey, I'm Mason. Noticed you killed it out there." Grace had barely glanced at him, focused on packing her gear. "Thanks. So, new girl, how about I show you around town?" My treat. There's this great steakhouse my family owns. I'm good, thanks. She'd zipped her bag and stood to leave. Mason blinked, unused to rejection. Come on, don't be shy. I know being new is tough, but I can make things easier for you here. Grace had finally looked at him then, really looked at him, and Mason felt something unfamiliar under her steady gaze. I said no thank you. Have a good day. She'd walked away, leaving Mason standing there with his mouth slightly open and Brady snickering behind him. No one said no to Mason Knight, especially not scholarship kids who should have been grateful for any attention from Willowbrook royalty. The rejection itself wasn't what turned Mason against her. He'd been turned down before, rarely, but it happened. No, what ignited his campaign wasn't wounded romantic pride, but the realization that Grace Turner didn't see him as anything special. She'd looked at him like he was just another teenage boy, not the prince of Willowbrook High. That indifference was a threat to everything his world was built on. If a scholarship kid could dismiss him so easily, what did that say about his power? What did that mean for the social order he'd inherited and enforced? Worse, he'd noticed other students watching their interaction, seeing him fail, seeing her walk away unbothered. That couldn't stand. She thinks she's better than us, he told Brady and Tyler later that day. Scholarship girl needs to learn how things work around here. Willowbrook High School sat on 40 acres of manicured Texas landscape, its red brick buildings and white columns projecting an image of Southern gentility that masked a vicious social hierarchy. The cheerleading squad represented the apex of female social power, their practice schedule as demanding as any athletes, their influence extending into every aspect of school life. Making the team meant more than athletics. It meant acceptance into Willowbrook's inner circle. The locker room where the squad changed was a testament to alumni donations. Marble countertops, individual shower stalls, and lockers spacious enough to hold entire wardrobes. It was here that Grace felt most out of place, surrounded by designer gym bags and conversations about spring break in Cabo. She'd learned to change quickly, to avoid the casual discussions of $1,000 shopping sprees and complaints about which Mercedes to drive to school. Morning practice started at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Coach Rivera, a former University of Texas cheerleader with zero tolerance for excuses, ran drills with military precision. Grace had impressed her from day one, executing routines with a control that came from years of martial arts discipline. But impressing the coach meant nothing if the team captain, Brittany Caldwell, decided you didn't belong. And Brittany took her cues from Mason Knight. The harassment started small, the way it always did at Willowbrook. Grace's locker combination was mysteriously changed, forcing her to get maintenance to cut the lock. Her practice clothes disappeared from the laundry service, leaving her to wash them at the laundromat. Someone kept accidentally scheduling her for equipment duty during the time slots reserved for studying in the library. Grace documented each incident in a small notebook, her uncle's voice echoing in her memory. Evidence wins fights before they start. But she knew better than to report anything yet, not when Mason's father reviewed every complaint that crossed his desk. Not when the last scholarship student who'd spoken up had found their grades mysteriously dropping until they lost their funding. What made it worse was Mason's continued attempts to ask her out, each rejection followed by escalating harassment. He'd corner her after practice with flowers, expensive roses that he'd make sure everyone saw her refuse. He'd loudly invite her to exclusive parties, making her rejection equally public. Each time she said no, the accidents and misunderstandings multiplied. Just say yes once, Brittany had advised during a water break. Go to one dinner, let him post some pictures, then say you're not compatible. It's easier than fighting him. Grace had replied, I'm not interested in easy. I'm interested in being left alone. The second phase of harassment turned public during lunch in the cafeteria, a space that resembled a country club dining room more than a school facility. Mason made his move. Grace sat alone at a corner table, reviewing chemistry notes while eating a sandwich from home. The other cheerleaders clustered at their designated table, shooting glances her way but maintaining their distance. Message received. You might be on the team, but you're not one of us. Grace, Mason's voice boomed across the cafeteria, ensuring maximum audience. He strolled over with Brady and Tyler flanking him, carrying an elaborate bouquet that must have cost $200. Got something for my favorite cheerleader. The cafeteria fell silent. Phones already came out to record. Grace didn't look up from her textbook. I'm studying, Mason. Come on, don't be like that. He set the flowers on her table with theatrical flair. I know you're playing hard to get, but everyone knows scholarship girls are just looking for a rich boyfriend. I'm trying to help you out here. The insult was wrapped in a smile, delivered loud enough for everyone to hear. Grace felt the familiar heat of anger rising in her chest, muscle memory begging her to shift into a defensive stance. Instead, she looked up calmly. I've told you repeatedly that I'm not interested. Please respect that. Respect? Mason laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. You want to talk about respect? I've been nothing but nice to you. Flowers, dinner invitations, offering to introduce you to people who matter. And you keep acting like you're too good for me. Newsflash scholarship. You're lucky I even noticed you exist. Tyler grabbed her chemistry book, holding it above his head. Maybe if you spent less time studying and more time being grateful for Mason's attention, you'd fit in better. Grace stood slowly, her movements controlled. At 5'6", she had to tilt her head back to meet Mason's eyes. But 8 years of facing down larger opponents had taught her that size meant nothing if you knew where to strike. Give me my book back. Say yes to dinner, Brady suggested with a smirk. One date with Mason and all your problems here disappear. Keep saying no. He shrugged meaningfully. Are you threatening me? Grace asked, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Mason stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper only she could hear. I don't make threats, Grace. I make promises, and I promise you this stubborn act is going to cost you everything. Your spot on the team, your scholarship, your future here, unless you stop pretending you're better than what I'm offering. Grace met his eyes steadily. I'm not pretending anything. I'm just not interested. Not in your flowers, not in your dinners, and definitely not in your threats. Mason's face darkened. He nodded to Tyler, who tossed the textbook into the nearby trash can, pages fluttering like broken wings. Oops, guess you'll have to dig for it. Good practice for your future when you're out of here. Grace didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't give them the reaction they wanted. She simply memorized their faces, their positions, their weaknesses. Mason favored his right knee, old football injury. Brady kept his weight too far forward. Tyler telegraphed his movements with his shoulders, information filed away for later use. Smart girl, Mason said when she remained silent. You're learning. Keep it up, and maybe you'll last the semester. Or you could just say yes, and all this stops. Your choice." They walked away laughing, high-fiving teammates, and basking in their perceived victory. Grace waited until they were gone before retrieving her book from the trash, wiping cold French fries from its cover. Around her, conversation slowly resumed, but she caught the looks, some pitying, some impressed, most simply relieved it wasn't them. Jenna Park slid into the seat across from her, followed, surprisingly, by a couple of other cheerleaders, Melissa Wong and Ashley Davis. "That was brutal," Melissa said quietly. "I'm sorry we didn't speak up." "He's been getting worse," Ashley added, glancing around nervously. "Ever since you turned him down that first time, his ego can't handle it." "It's not about his ego," Jenna corrected. "It's about power. Grace is showing everyone that saying no to Mason Knight is possible. That's dangerous to him." She pulled out her phone, showing Grace a saved folder labeled Insurance. "Which is why some of us have been documenting everything Mason does, for when someone's finally brave enough to use it." Grace stared at the folder icon, understanding dawning. "You're collecting evidence. 3 years' worth, videos, screenshots, witness statements. Mason's hurt a lot of people, Grace. Both girls who rejected him and scholarship kids who threatened the social order. But nobody's been strong enough to be the catalyst for change." Jenna's eyes searched hers. "Are you?" Before Grace could answer, her phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged her in a social media post. The image showed her digging through the trash, carefully cropped to hide the context. The caption, "When you're too proud to accept help from your betters." Trash scholarship, know your place. Within minutes, it had dozens of likes and comments, each one more cruel than the last. Grace recognized the coordinated attack, Mason's digital foot soldiers doing his dirty work. She screenshotted everything, adding to her growing file. "See?" Jenna said quietly. "This is what they do. Death by 1,000 cuts, all deniable, all devastating, unless someone stops them." The third wave of harassment targeted Grace's position on the squad directly. During afternoon practice, equipment mysteriously malfunctioned whenever she used it. The spring floor seemed slippier under her feet. Safety mats disappeared when she attempted difficult tumbling passes. Coach Rivera grew increasingly frustrated, not with Grace, but with the obvious sabotage she couldn't prove. "Turner!" Coach barked after Grace's third near miss on a back handspring. "What's going on? You nailed this yesterday." "Someone greased the mat," Grace said simply, showing her coach the telltale shine on her palms. Coach Rivera's expression darkened. She'd been at Willowbrook for 5 years, long enough to recognize Mason Knight's handiwork. But she also knew her contract was up for renewal, and Principal Knight had final say. "Everyone, take 5, she announced. "Caldwell, get maintenance to check all equipment." Brittany approached Grace during the break, her voice low. "Look, I'm not saying I approve, but Mason really likes you, like actually likes you, not just wants to hook up. Would it kill you to give him one chance? It would make everyone's life easier, including mine," Grace asked. "Would it?" Brittany hesitated. "Maybe not at first, but once he gets what he wants, he usually moves on, and then you'd be under his protection instead of his target." "I'm not a prize to be won or a problem to be solved," Grace replied. "I'm a person who said no. That should be enough." "Should be," Brittany agreed sadly, "but at Willowbrook, should doesn't mean much." The whispered threat came during cool-down stretches. Brady Chen dropped down beside her, his voice barely audible over the practice music. Mason wanted me to give you one last chance. Homecoming's coming up. Be his date, make it public, and all this stops. Keep refusing, and things get worse. Worse, how? Grace continued her hamstring stretch. Flexibility, another gift from martial arts training. Let's just say accidents happen, especially to girls who don't know when to accept a good offer. His hand briefly touched her ponytail. Pretty hair like this. Would be a shame if something happened to it. The threat was so casually delivered that Grace almost laughed. These boys had no idea who they were dealing with. They saw a scholarship cheerleader and assumed weakness. They had no clue she'd once faced down 3 black belts in a tournament finals and walked away victorious. "Tell Mason my answer is still no," she said pleasantly. "To homecoming. To dinner. To all of it." Brady's face darkened. "You're making a mistake. He's given you more chances than anyone else ever got." "I didn't ask for chances. I asked to be left alone." "That's not how it works here," Brady snapped. "You don't get to come into our world and act like you're above it. Mason's offering you a way to belong. Keep refusing, and you'll find out what it really means to be alone at Willowbrook." The incident that changed everything. The incident that changed everything occurred the following Tuesday after late practice. Grace had stayed behind to work on her aerial routine, determined to prove she deserved her spot despite the mounting pressure to quit. The gym was supposedly empty, Coach Rivera having left an hour earlier, the other girls scattered to their expensive cars and dinner plans. Grace was alone in the locker room, hair still damp from her shower, when she heard the door bang open. Male voices echoed off the tiles. Mason, Brady, Tyler. Their laughter held an edge that made her instincts scream danger. "Well, well," Mason drawled, appearing around the corner with something glinting in his hand. "Look who's all alone, no crowd to play tough for." Grace's eyes locked onto the scissors. Not the safety, rounded kind from art class, but sharp fabric shears from the equipment room. Her body automatically shifted into a ready stance before she forced herself to appear relaxed. "Boys aren't allowed in here. My school, my rules." Mason advanced slowly, his friends spreading out to flank her. "You know, Grace, I've been thinking. Maybe you keep saying no because you think you're too good for me. Maybe you need to be brought down a level, starting with that perfect ponytail you're so proud of." The space was tight. Lockers on both sides, bench in the middle, only one exit now blocked by Tyler's bulk. Grace calculated distances, angles, options. 3 opponents, confined space, weapon in play. Her uncle would call this a gift. Limited room meant limited attack vectors. "This is about me rejecting you?" Grace asked, buying time while she positioned herself better. "This is about respect," Mason snarled. "I've been nice, I've been patient. I've offered you everything, protection, status, a future at this school, and you throw it in my face like I'm nobody. Well, guess what? You're about to learn what being nobody really feels like." "Touch me and I'll scream," Grace warned, though she knew the gym was too far from the main building for anyone to hear. "Go ahead," Brady laughed, pulling out his phone. "We'll just say you invited us here, changed your mind about Mason, then got hysterical when he said he wasn't interested anymore. Who's going to believe the desperate scholarship girl over us?" Mason lunged forward faster than Grace expected, his free hand grabbing for her ponytail. But 8 years of training kicked in before conscious thought. Grace pivoted on her left foot, her right leg sweeping up in a perfect roundhouse kick that caught Mason's wrist. The scissors flew from his grip, clattering across the floor as he yelped in pain and surprise. "What the—" Brady started forward, but Grace was already moving. She grabbed his reaching arm, used his momentum against him, and sent him crashing into the lockers with a modified judo throw. The metallic bang echoed through the room as Brady slumped to the floor, dazed. Tyler, the biggest of the three, charged like a bull. Grace dropped low, swept his legs, and watched 200 pounds of football player hit the tile floor hard enough to knock the wind out of him. She rolled backward, came up in a crouch, and waited. The entire encounter had taken less than 15 seconds. Mason clutched his wrist, staring at her in shock. You can't, your father will what?" Grace stood slowly, keeping all three boys in her peripheral vision. "Expel me for defending myself when the security cameras," she pointed to the obvious dome in the corner, "recorded you entering the girls' locker room with a weapon." The color drained from Mason's face as he realized his mistake. In his arrogance, he'd forgotten about the new cameras installed after last year's theft incident. Cameras that would show 3 male students cornering a female student with scissors, clearly showing she was defending herself against assault. "We were just trying to scare you," Brady wheezed from his position against the lockers. "Because you kept rejecting Mason. It wasn't supposed to—" "Shut up," Mason snapped, but the damage was done. Brady had just admitted their motive on camera. Grace picked up the scissors, careful to only touch them with her towel. "Let me make something clear. My rejection of your advances isn't an insult, Mason. It's a right, one that you've turned into a campaign of harassment and now attempted assault. That ends today." Tyler managed to sit up, his face red with embarrassment and oxygen deprivation. "You're dead, you know that, right? Nobody attacks us and stays at this school." Grace smiled then, the expression sharp as the scissors in her hand. "I didn't attack anyone. I defended myself against 3 boys who cornered me with a weapon because one of them couldn't handle the word no. But you're right about one thing. Someone's leaving this school, just not who you think." She moved toward the door, forcing them to scramble out of her way. "Oh, and Mason, tell your father I'll be in his office tomorrow morning with video evidence, witness statements from 3 years of your behavior, and my attorney. Let's see how well boys will be boys' plays when the news gets hold of this story." As she walked out, leaving 3 of Willowbrook's most powerful students sprawled on the locker room floor, Grace heard Brady whisper, "Dude, she knows martial arts. Like, real martial arts." "Shut up," Mason snarled, but fear had replaced arrogance in his voice. "This isn't over." Grace made it to the parking lot before her hands started shaking. Adrenaline crash, her uncle had called it, the price of controlled violence. She sat in her beat-up Honda Civic, doors locked, and called Jenna. "You were right," she said when her friend answered. "I'm ready to be the catalyst." "What happened?" Jenna's voice sharpened with concern. "Mason happened, with scissors, in the locker room, because I wouldn't date him." Grace took a steadying breath. "But the cameras caught everything, and I think it's time to use that folder of yours." "Oh my God, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "No." Grace allowed herself a small smile. "They're the ones who got hurt. Turns out scholarship kids can fight back when cornered." "Grace, this is huge. Mason admitting on camera that this was about you rejecting him. That's game over for their whole 'she's lying' defense." "Only if the footage survives the night," Grace said grimly. "We need to move fast." "Already on it," Jenna promised. "I'll call my mom. She knows people at the district level. And Grace, I'm proud of you. It's about time someone showed these entitled jerks that no means no, whether you're rich or poor." As Grace drove home, she noticed a text from an unknown number. "Security footage already deleted from the main server. But don't worry, I made a copy first. Check your email. A friend in IT." She pulled over, opened her email, and found a video file, clear as day. It showed Mason entering with scissors, admitting this was about her rejections, and attacking first. Everything she needed. The chess game had begun. And for the first time since arriving at Willowbrook, Grace Turner wasn't playing defense. Tomorrow would bring Principal Knight's wrath, Mason's retaliation, and a battle for her future at the school. But tonight, she'd protected herself and sent a message that would ripple through Willowbrook's hallowed halls. Money couldn't buy consent. Rejection wasn't an insult, and the new girl might be poor, might be a scholarship student, might be everything they looked down on, but she was nobody's victim. The war for Willowbrook High was about to begin, and Grace Turner had just fired the first shot.